was like interesting what you're doing and stuff like that. So I was like, awesome. Well, so I'm here with the gaming historian, and I actually have some interesting questions because I think I found you because my friend Bob was like, hey, you know the History Channel when they do like, oh, let's go to those bunkers and stuff like that. There's guys that do that with games. I'm like, that sounds awesome. And then I just found Game Chasers. I think I just found them through you.
Through Game Chasers?
Yeah,
that's pretty normal. Yeah.
So I know like with the Game Chasers, like you're a big game collector, and I actually wanted to get your thoughts on like, cause like nowadays like a lot of games, especially at this year's E3, a lot of them really have a lot of focus for like, oh, we have multiplayer internet. There's not really a lot of things after that, and I wanted to get your thoughts because I know like with old games, like, you know, they didn't have internet, so okay, we can do multiplayer locally and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So what do you think of games now that will have that multiplayer focus, and do you think that they'll be around for later generations, like how we collect games from later generations before us?
So with multiplayer games, it's good to have the online multiplayer component because, you know, a lot of my friends, we don't live close to each other anymore. So it's nice I can go online and play a game with them. But I really appreciate the games that have the local multiplayer too, just like the old school games. Because that's timeless, that's never going to go away. Because, you know, online support for games, eventually it ends. Every single game with online support ends. So I do appreciate the companies that are making these games that have local multiplayer still. Like, you know, Shovel Knight had the co-op, and I think Cuphead. Did you hear about Cuphead? I think Cuphead has local multiplayer.
It's the game like it's the game I'm most excited about, and I just wait for it to come out.
Yeah. So it's very much appreciated when developers put that in.
Now, do you think like what's a good example of like having like multiplayer focus, but like having something for later on where it's like, okay, the multiplayer is gone, but there's still something here? Like, what do you feel is like a good example of that? Because in my mind, I think Splatoon has something pretty good where it's like it's mainly multiplayer focus, but there's like a pretty decent like single player mode there. Like, do you have an example?
Any old school first person shooter on PC or even consoles, just a good single player campaign, like the Wolfenstein series or even Doom. You know, great single player, but multiplayer is like the add-on to the single player. So when they make the and then the multiplayer is just like, oh, you can do this too. And then they make expansion packs for the single player. I mean, I don't know if you remember the original Call of Duty on PC.
That's before I was more in N64 and PlayStation 1.
So the original Call of Duty had a really great single player. The multiplayer was fantastic too, but when the multiplayer died down, they put out an expansion pack called United Offensive. It extended the single player campaign and then added new multiplayer stuff. So there you go.
Oh, so I never knew, because that's like a really good example of like, okay, the game's dead, but like we can release something later, so like there's something there for later on generation.
Right. So I mean, DLC today. I mean, some DLC is a ripoff, but sometimes you get extensions like the new Shovel Knight, the Plague Knight stuff. Yeah. I mean, there you go. You can play single player in a whole new way just by adding a new character.
Now, what do you actually, like, speaking of DLC, what do you think about that? Because like one of the worries that I have is like right now, like PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4, like they're connected and they're still going. Right. But my one worry is that one of them's gonna go away. And if you haven't like backed them up to a hard drive or stuff like that, DLC, like if you don't have the DLC by then, they're gonna be gone. Do you think there's a solution to that, or you think they'll just might be gone forever?
It's actually a big problem in the industry right now. Are you familiar with the game Marvel Ultimate Alliance?
Yes, I am.
So they put out a lot of DLC for that game, and eventually the DLC was just gone. You couldn't get it anymore. The only way you could get it is if you got Marvel Ultimate Alliance Gold Edition, a physical release. That game is worth a ton of money now because it's the only way you can get the DLC. A lot of developers are concerned that they're making this DLC and people won't have access to it ever again, you know. So there's efforts to archive that stuff. It's a lot easier with PC games. Consoles, yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah, because I know that when I got Soul Calibur 5, they had a limited edition one where it came with like exclusive costumes, but they never released it online, and you could only get it with that. Fortunately, I was able to find it for like $40, but I'm sure down the line that's going to be more expensive.
Absolutely.
I know you're a big collector yourself. What would you say is the most rarest, the most expensive thing that you have in your collection? Because you have a decent amount of stuff.
The rarest thing I have is probably Little Samson on the NES. But I bought that a long time ago when it wasn't worth what it is today. But I mean, there's stuff that people want that's not really rare, like Earthbound. Earthbound is not a rare game. It's uncommon, but because people want it so much, the price just skyrockets. So, yeah, I'd say Little Samson's the rarest thing I have.
I also wanted to get your opinion on something, because me and my friend Bob, sometimes like you hear like, oh, don't go to eBay. They sometimes rip you off with prices. For a lot of the games that we get, we sometimes find that like the prices that we find there are sometimes better than prices that we find here. Do you think like eBay kind of gets a bad rep, and like depending on the type of game, there's a good marketplace to like find games there?
Yeah, eBay does get a bad reputation. I buy stuff on eBay all the time. If I need it for an episode, I usually get it on eBay. I mean, and you're right, even the prices at some of these conventions, they're marked up $20 higher than eBay. So I encourage using eBay to find retro games. Yeah.
Now, what do you think of because we live in Long Island, and like there's some like nice people there, like especially here, they're like these are the nicest sellers of like classic games like we've ever met. And we're in New York, and sometimes people are a little like, prices are too high. Like, what do you think is a way to, kind of circumvent that? Like, let's just say that you're in an area and there are people that like sell classic games, but they sell it for like such a ridiculous price.
Well,
or are you just screwed?
I mean, I always try to negotiate on my prices, but you have to, when you're looking for something, you have to be patient. It's okay to say no. I mean, don't let your desire to get a game make you pay more for it, I guess is what I'm saying. So if you go to a store with high prices and they're not willing to negotiate with you, then you just don't buy from them. I mean,
have you ever made a purchase that you're like, oh, I really want this, and then immediately like a day later like, oh, that was a better price?
Okay. I'm sure I have. I can't recall one specific example right now, but I think everybody's done that at some point. You want it so bad, you're willing to pay whatever for it,
What got you into game collecting, out of curiosity?
Game collecting? So obviously, growing up, I played video games. And then in college, I got a job at GameStop. And when you work at GameStop, people bring in some cool stuff. And that's really when I got back into collecting. Because one, you're an adult now, and you have money. When you were a kid, you didn't have hundreds of dollars sitting around. So, you can collect games finally. You can get all those games you wanted as a kid. So really when I started working at GameStop is when I started building my collection. And it's funny because GameStop, they didn't take retro games. If people brought in retro games, GameStop would say, we don't take those.
Oh, really?
So what I would do is say, here's my number. I'll buy those games from you after I get off work.
Did you ever get in trouble for that?
No, as long as you did it outside of work, it was okay.
Now, what's your opinion on GameStop? Because I've heard a lot of horror stories from people that have worked at GameStop.
Yeah, it's not a good company. Does not treat employees fairly, does not compensate them well, no benefits, at least when I was working there. Rather than fire somebody, they would just cut their hours to nothing, to where you would force them to go find another job. I loved working there, talking to people that were into games, because I love gaming. I like talking to people that are into gaming, but the actual corporation, not so good.
I had a question. Hold on. Is there any game franchise you feel? No, that's the wrong wait. Why is that with that? Anyway, there's one more question. I swear I had it.
Take your time.
I had it. Oh, what are your thoughts of like mom and pop shops? Do you feel like they deserve more love? Because I always try to support like every single mom and pop shop I come across, big or small.
I am a huge fan of mom and pop shops. Unfortunately, there's not too many anymore. In my town, we have like one or two. I try to go to them as much as possible, but they're good because for a mom and pop shop to open a video game store, they have to care about video games, you know? So they have a passion for it. They're willing to work on prices with you a little more than, say, a GameStop. So, and it's good to support a local business. You know, when you buy a game from them, you know you're helping them. You know, you're not helping, you know, an executive making $3 million a year or something. So, yeah, mom and pop shops are the way to go.
And one last question, because I actually wanted to get your opinion on it.
All right.
What do you think of emulation? And in the right circumstances of its use, do you think it's beneficial for, like, you know, keeping, you know, old classic games like alive even way after they're past their prime?
Emulation is an incredible thing that I wish more people would use. It's a way to archive games that possibly 25 years from now you won't be able to play anymore on the original system. So emulation is incredibly important. You know, some games that weren't even released to the public you can play because of emulation. You know, the music industry and the film industry, they use forms of emulation to re-release albums or convert an old movie into the digital format. It's a form of emulation, so why can't video games do it?
No, absolutely right.
Yeah.
Thanks, man. I actually appreciate your time. Anything you want to shout out, promote? Anything coming out?
Watch The Gaming Historian on YouTube.
Simple to the point. Thanks,
Yep.
man.
Hey, no problem.